In the 3 phases of fighting, there's a very important phase called the clinch fighting. We're going to work on the clinch today and establishing, closing the distance. We want to concentrate on some basic pummeling drills so that you can establish dominant positions and some drills to be effective from those dominant positions. We're going to start today with some defensive positions and elbow destruction and some ways to protect yourself as you try to close the distance. Helping me today is one of our Team Quest fighters, Nathan Quarry. So it's very important as I control this distance, I either want to be in long range where I can't be reached by my opponent, or as I move into that middle range, I want to make sure that I'm covered. I've covered my chin and my face, because you always know where the target is. The guy's going to try and hit you or kick you in the face. I like to use an elbow destruction where I'm just sliding my hand up and putting my elbow in front of that target, either here or here. So as I move through that middle range or range of exchanges and establish that clinch range, I'm covered, I'm protected. And then once I establish that close range or attached range, I can start to fight for those dominant positions, the underhook, okay, or the double underhook, using that collar tie. We're going to go through several of these positions and make sure that we can protect ourselves and then establish that dominant position we're looking for. Okay, so I want to use that elbow destruction, close that distance, attach myself to my opponent. I want to move through the range of exchanges. If I stop here and pause, I'm vulnerable to be hit, kicked, or kneed. So I'm at long range, covering. Now I'm at that attached range, right to the underhook, the dominant position. Use the elbow destruction. Okay. And that actually hurts. Even with gloves on, if somebody hits your elbow with their hand, the chance of them breaking those small bones in their hand is pretty good. And it's generally a good way to protect yourself in a lot of situations. Okay. Now the first thing that I like to cover after we go from protecting ourselves and moving through that range is different ways to close that distance. One of the ways I can use is to bait my opponent into coming into that middle range, so that I want him to try and punch or kick at me. And again, that's where being covered so that I can slip that punch and penetrate. And that penetration could either be a level change to a takedown, or it could be penetration to the clinch or attached position. So we'll give you some different points of view for this elbow destruction so you can kind of get it from different angles. And again, I'm using the elbow destruction to move through that middle range, to slip that jab or that punch and attach myself to my opponent, move into clinch range. So I'm here. Now that's one way is to be defensive. Bait your opponent into moving into that middle range and throwing a punch or a kick so that you can close the distance. The other side of that coin, and the one that I tend to use, is being offensive, where I'm going to throw a punch or a kick to get my opponent to cover and stop moving, set his feet, so that then I can move through that middle range and establish clinch range. One of the things that I like to use is an overhand right to get my opponent to cover, and then that's going to allow me, as he stops to cover and sets his feet, to close that distance and achieve that clinch or attached position. So I'm going to throw an overhand right, my opponent's going to cover, and I'm going to follow that punch right to clinch. Okay. It doesn't have to be an overhand right. I could use a jab the same way. Again, I'm just sticking something in his face, making him cover so that I can force him to stop moving his feet, and now I can close that distance and move through that range of exchanges. Another option in an offensive manner is to use a front kick to get him to move, set his feet, and then close that distance and move through that middle range. I'm just going to wait. Again, even if he starts to move into that range, I'm just bringing that front foot up, again covering, and then following that front kick right through that range of exchanges to the clinch range or attached position. It's important, again, that I control the distance. I don't move into that range or allow my opponent to move into that range until I'm ready to move all the way through it and attach myself to him. If I stand in that middle range, I'm asking to be hit, and you're going to get hit. It doesn't matter. As long as I stay in this range, sure, I can hit him, but he's going to hit me as well. So it's important. Long range, outer range, so he can't reach me, he can't hit me. I don't move into that range unless I'm baiting him to be offensive so I can slip and attach myself to him. Or I only move into that range if I'm going to be offensive and get him to cover so I can move through that range and attach myself to him again in that clinch position or attached position. So it's very important. You might want to work some footwork back and forth, get used to controlling that space and knowing how long your opponent is so that I can establish that range and whether or not I'm in danger or just out of danger. It's important to control that distance. Use your footwork and move to control that distance so I can close when I'm ready to close, and then in doing that I control the tempo of the fight. So once you've learned to protect yourself and use those elbow destructions and move through that range of exchanges and attach yourself to your opponent or establish that clinch range, you want to be able to establish dominant positions and be effective from that clinch range. So it's important to learn to pummel in exactly what you're looking for. And one of the first and most effective dominant positions that I feel once you establish this clinch range is establishing a good underhook position. It's not like the traditional boxing technique, because you see, all I'm interested in here is smothering his hands and keeping him from being able to hit me. But in doing that, I'm giving him a lot of position. And in mixed martial arts, where the fight can go to the ground, I don't want to give him all that leverage and position so that he can effectively use his hips and throw me down. So it's important to be able to change this position or establish a dominant position where I'm controlling my opponent's arms and lines of defense, and now I have a lot of attacks, both offensively striking and the ability to take my opponent down from this dominant position. Now, a real simple drill and a way to kind of build this foundation of how to establish dominant positions in pummeling is a simple swimming drill where Nathan and I are both in an over and under position. I have an underhook here, Nathan has an underhook here. We're in the same exact position. He has the same thing I have. Now as I create space and re-pummel over his arm, Nathan's doing the same thing on the other side there. And we basically exchange underhooks. And now we come back, I'm re-pummeling, Nathan's re-pummeling, we exchange underhooks. And as you get a rhythm for this and you're chest to chest and you're moving and pummeling, it becomes this swimming motion. And obviously this swimming motion doesn't have a lot of reality to it, but it's just a drill to kind of develop the sensitivity in your body so that when you get into this clinch range, the first thing you're thinking about is pummeling, getting inside and establishing that dominant position. So you start out by just developing that sensitivity and that skill by this swimming drill where I'm digging for underhooks and Nathan is digging for underhooks at the same time. Notice we're chest to chest, close proximity, using our legs and hips as we drive and pummel. Just going inside, repummel, 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 repummel. You can pick up speed as you get more comfortable with the drill. It starts to become faster. And then as you get better and better at establishing this underhook in this dominant position, you can start making this more real and more live by actually fighting, moving each other, and pummeling chest to chest, and digging a little more. You can see the drive in the legs, the hips, the posture, into your opponent, controlling him, trying to establish that dominant position. And then as you progress and get better and better, once you establish a dominant position, you want to start to try and hang on to it. Keep that dominant position. Make it hard for him to repummel. Okay, and that's when it starts to become real and applies more to fighting. Okay, and then there's a few things that we like to drill and develop some skills and offensive techniques for takedowns off of this simple pummeling drill. Okay, so as I do this swimming motion, all I'm going to do is as Nathan repummels, okay, I'm going to change levels and direct my head right under his arm with a duck under position. Okay. Now again, this isn't a real situation where he's resisting and I'm in a dominant position and I'm trying to set up a duck under, but you need to develop the technique of being able to change levels, timing, be able to attack your opponent's body. Okay, and the biggest thing is starting to realize that I can predict what Nathan's going to do, and in that knowledge of knowing how he's going to react to a certain situation, I can use that knowledge against him. I know if I have an underhook that Nathan wants to repummel, he wants to take that underhook away from me. So as I feel him start to take that underhook away and repummel, I can use that little bit of knowledge of him repummeling and reacting to that situation against him and duck or attack. Okay, it's in that knowledge and in that prediction that the real art in the sport comes out. I can create situations where I can reasonably predict how my opponent is going to react in that situation and use that knowledge against him. That's the setup. I'm setting him up so that I can achieve an offensive tactic, a takedown, a punch, a knee, whatever that setup is. So again, we're pummeling. I'm predicting that as I get my underhook here, Nathan's going to repummel. And in that repummel, I'm redirecting his elbow and attacking in that duck under. Again, I want to emphasize, as he repummels, I'm just going to raise he's digging that hand in, I'm raising my elbow, creating that space. All I need is that little bit of space for my head. Okay, I don't bend at the waist. I want to change levels with my knees, get my hips down, that good athletic, explosive position. So as he repummels, level change, create that space for my head, I come right up, okay, and staying tight, close to my opponent. As I establish this position and get into this duck under, now I want to exaggerate using my head and driving into my opponent. I don't want to think about going around his hips. I want to think about going through his body. It's nice to have these cauliflower ears to drive into guys' ribs and move through them. Okay, so I don't want to go around him. I want to go through him. And going through him, I move myself into position to take his back or be dominant. Okay, so concentrate on that level change, bending the knees, keeping the head up and the hips in, and then moving through my opponent. Okay, so the duck under, and try to do it on both sides if you can start establishing that ambidexterity where you can execute techniques on the left or the right side. Now what you do is you trade back and forth. So I'm pummeling, Nate's going to execute his duck under. Boom. And we're back to pummeling. I'm going to execute my duck under. And then Nathan. So again, I want to focus on establishing that good position, that level change, driving my head up and into my opponent, and coming into a good position. Okay, and there's some other techniques that we can add to this along the same lines where I'm drilling and establishing good posture, good tactics, good technique, and that sensitivity in your body so that you feel these situations. And then it starts to come real natural when you're in live situations. You just execute the techniques. Another one of the techniques is what I like a slide by, and it's one of my favorite techniques. And again, it comes off of that re-pummel. I can predict when I have an underhook that Nathan's going to want to take that underhook away from me and re-pummel. As he re-pummels this time, instead of, re-pummel again for me, instead of going under that arm, I'm going to redirect that arm and trap it to his side. Okay, I'm sliding my head past his arm and then trapping that arm to his side, a slide by. Okay, sliding my head by, trapping that arm to his side. And again, I don't want to take my hips around the corner here and around him, because that's just going to allow him to move his feet and face me with his hips. Okay, as I slide by, I want to drive my ear and drive my head through his body. Okay, obviously, Greco-Roman wrestling, I'm not allowed to grab below the waist, so the hand would be up here. In a fight or freestyle or any mixed martial arts competition, I can attack the legs and trip and use the legs, so that hand would slide right down to that knee. Your knee being the weak link and the joint that only moves in one direction. I want to take advantage of that. Especially when I grab Nate's knee, he doesn't move very well laterally. So I want to take advantage of that lack of lateral motion by us humans and drive through. Okay. Again, off of the pummel, slide. Off of the pummel, he's re-pummeling. I'm redirecting that hand down. So the nice thing about this slide-by position is that I trap this arm to my opponent's side. One of the dangers of shooting a double leg is that I leave this arm free and I allow my opponent, as I take him down, to throw his legs around me and choke me. I end up in this guillotine position. Using this slide by to a double leg, I'm trapping that arm to his side. By the time he gets his arm out of there, he's already on the deck, he's already on the ground, and I've passed his legs. It makes it pretty hard for him to choke me. So that's one of the nice things about this slide by. Now obviously, this isn't what a real slide by would look like in a real fighting situation, but you've got to develop the foundation and the technique and the sensitivity to be able to level change and put all these timing things together to establish that slide by in a real situation. So you want to practice it again off of this simple swimming and drilling position. Okay, and you can trade back and forth again, just like the duck under. Nate can do a duck under or a slide by, and then I can do a duck under or slide by, back and forth in the swimming, drilling position. So Nate hits his technique, slide by. And I take my technique, duck under. Nate goes back, his turn. You see how Nate drove his head through my body, had me moving laterally, making me hop basically on 1 foot, and he was blocking that knee. It's real important, even in the duck under, that I exaggerate that motion through my opponent. Slide by, same thing. Through, across. I want to drive him straight back. Again, in driving him straight back, he's going to pull guard, and I want to avoid that guard position and not have to worry about passing the guard once we hit the ground. That's important. Level change, hips in, head up, that athletic position we're always trying to achieve. Okay. Now another technique that I like to use that comes in handy off of this same drill is an arm drag. Okay. As we're doing this swimming and pummeling technique, now I know he's going to re-pummel. I'm just going to redirect his hand. My hand's going to come up, attack him above the elbow, because what I'm trying to do here is move his body. I want to create that opening or opportunity here where I can penetrate to his body. Okay, he's got a couple of lines of defense he's going to use to keep me away from him. His hand, obviously, his elbow, and his head. I've got to get past those lines of defense in order to get to his hips or attack his body and thus take him to the mat. And these dominant positions eliminate those lines of defense. Okay, I'm predicting that he's going to re-pummel. I can hit my slide by or my duck under, or I can arm drag. And again, I've eliminated those lines of defense and created that situation where I can attack his body. So again, as he re-pummels, I'm just bringing my hand to myself, kind of redirecting his re-pummel. I don't want it to get in here where I can't pass it in front of me. Okay, I'm redirecting it as he re-pummels, redirecting that hand across in front of my body, creating that opening, that split-second opening to penetrate and attack. Common mistake, as I drag, a lot of people are going to step with this leg, this outside leg. And the problem with doing that, and sometimes you'll catch you guys so off guard that this will work. You'll get around behind it. But Nate basically has the same thing I have here. If I step with this outside foot, he's going to step too, take his hips away from me, and you end up like a dog chasing its tail. Okay? Again, I want to exaggerate that through my opponent, cutting him off, turning the corner and moving through my opponent. So as I drag, I don't want to step around him, I want to step through him. I'm cutting him off, stepping across where he's going to be. Not where he's at now, but where he's going to be. Okay, so as I drag, I step across through my opponent and drive through him and attack him here. Now he's got no option. He's going to have to bail out. He's going to have to go down to the mat and create something from a ground fighting position. Okay, so again, the swimming position, I'm just going to redirect that hand. Redirect that hand across, catch him above the elbow, and attack the waist. And you put all three of these together off of this, and it's a really nice warm-up drill, way to get started, get your body moving, get your joints loose, and you kind of developing that sensitivity and those level changes and those attacks through your opponent. And then that creates a situation where once you get comfortable with that, you can create situations from the dominant positions and execute these techniques in a real situation, in a real fight. So again, swimming, pummeling. Nate executes 2 or 3 techniques. And you go back and forth, 3 and 3, 3 and 3. You're warming up, developing timing and sensitivity for those techniques. It's real important. So I'm very fortunate in that I have a great workout partner in Nathan. And workout partners are very important and very hard to find, good ones sometimes. And the important thing about it is, it isn't about winning or losing. It's about developing the timing and the technique. And so Nathan, in this situation, is not giving me a whole bunch of resistance. We're basically cooperating, we're working together so that we can both develop the timing and the sensitivity and execute good, proper technique. And that a lot of times is really hard to find. So it's important to find a good workout partner. Find somebody who you can work with, who doesn't have an ego, who doesn't have a problem with letting you take them down or letting you execute good technique. And this goes all the way to light sparring, to punching and kicking. It's not about whether or not you got hit. It's about developing that technique and developing those good execution of combinations and all those things. And this is no different. So as we pummel, we're giving each other resistance. We're making it as real as we can. But at the same time, Nathan's going to allow me to level change and drive through him and execute that good proper technique, or that arm drag, or that duck under, or whatever the technique is that you're drilling. And it's important that you be able to cooperate and work together so that you both, in the long run, come out ahead. So as we go with the proper resistance, again, the better you get at it, the more alive it becomes. You can move each other around, give him some resistance, and then he executes his technique. It doesn't matter, you can mix it up. I could go 2s, he goes 2, I go 2, or you can go 6s. You want to develop more of a flow, add the number, make it bigger. So I'm going to do 6 techniques in a row, and then Nate would do 6 techniques in a row. Generally 3 and 3. Nate goes 3, I go 3, back and forth. So it doesn't matter what the technique is. It could be a high crotch, okay? It could be a punching combination. We're working together, giving each other resistance so that we can develop that sensitivity and be able to execute that technique and timing. It doesn't matter whether it's a combination of kicks and punches, or a takedown, or this pummeling drill that we're working on now. You want to be able to work together so you can develop that sensitivity. And then once you develop that foundation, you establish those positions, and you can execute the technique in real time against a resisting opponent. So it's important to check your ego at the door and find a partner that you can work with who's going to give you the proper amount of resistance and give you some different looks, but still allow you to execute the technique and develop that. Now it's, again, if we take this from the top and kind of review what we've covered, we started with controlling the distance using your footwork to stay out in long range and create some situations where you can use an elbow destruction to protect yourself as you move through that range of exchanges, or that middle range, and then establish that dominant position, or that clinch. Okay, once you attach yourself to your opponent, we use that underhook as a main dominant position, and then we establish that swimming position as a drill to kind of develop that sensitivity of repummeling, fighting for that inside position, fighting for that underhook. And then off of that swimming position, we worked on that level change, that good athletic position, changing levels, keeping your head up and your hips in, for the duck under, for the slide by, for the arm drag. And then we talked about using that cooperative state of mind so that you and your opponent are giving each other resistance, but not trying to stop each other from executing the technique. You want to develop the timing and the sensitivity and the proper execution of the technique so that when it comes time to really get it on in a fight situation, you have that foundation so that you can execute the technique properly.